Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, depending on what part of the country you're located at. This is Jasir Jamal from Texas 1031 Exchanges, located down south of the country, of course. So before I begin this video, let me just go ahead and start by saying this, that every single thing I say in all of my videos, the ones that I have published and the ones that I intend on publishing in the future, including but not limited to this one, every single thing I say in these videos is meant for entertainment, informational, and educational purposes only. Please do not consider or construe anything I say in these videos as investment or legal advice in any way, shape, or form. You folks should always do your own due diligence every time you're making a big investment decision, whether it be regarding 1031 exchanges or whether it not be with regards to 1031 exchanges. You should always do your own due diligence and always consult with your own CPA, your own tax attorney, and your own estate attorney before you make these big decisions. Because at the end of the day, investments have risks. You're never guaranteed to make money, you know. Sometimes you can lose money as well. That's why it's important you do your own due diligence and consult with your own experts before you decide to move forward on any investment. Now, with that being said, let's get into the video. So, by far you folks understand the word boot, B-O-O-T. You folks have heard me say it repeatedly throughout my videos, which basically is you sell your relinquished property, you need to make sure all your proceeds need to be invested, fully invested into your replacement property in order for the exchange to be successful. And if any of the money is left over, that's considered boot and it will be taxed at the end of the year. And you folks are also familiar with how exactly it is taxed. And if you held that relinquished property for less than a year and you still decided to do an exchange, which you folks know my opinion on, but if you decided to do it, your boot will be taxed at these complicated, long federal income tax rates, which are also not only your ordinary income tax rates, but also short-term capital gain tax rates. But then if that relinquished property was held for a year or more and then you did a 1031, then all the boot that you have will be taxed at right over here on these long-term capital gain tax rates. So today I want to go ahead and talk about debt boot, which basically means that, look, what would happen, or at least what kind of a taxable event could be triggered if, like, let's say you have $1 million as a mortgage on your relinquished property, and then you go out there, you buy your new property, you inject all your capital gain proceeds in there, but your mortgage on that one ends up being $500,000. What can happen over there? Well, let me draw it out for you folks, and let's talk about it very quickly. So let's say, for example, you have this little nice investment property of yours. It's worth, let's say, $1 million. That's the price right there. No worries. And let's say the debt that you have on here is worth, let's say, $500,000. No problem. That's the debt. And next thing you know, by first glance, you folks can easily understand that if you were to do a 1031 or if you were to sell this, your proceeds would be $500,000 in proceeds. No problem. But then you decide to go ahead and buy this bigger property right over here, which is worth $2 million. Which is worth $2 million. No problem. That's the price. That's good. You satisfied the requirement of equal in value or higher. No problem, which you just did. That's good. And then next thing you know, unfortunately, the debt that you have on this property ends up being about, let's say, $100,000 for whatever reason. So, of course, you use your $500,000 in proceeds over here for the down payment. I mean, not the down payment, but you injected them over here fully. And next thing you know, the price goes down to 1.5 million. But then let's just say you had some extra cash laying around, and let's say that extra cash was $1.4 million, and you decided to throw that in here, which is good, don't get me wrong. But now here's where the problem comes. The debt or the mortgage that you had on this house was $500,000. That's fine. But the debt over here, just because you injected your personal cash, which is okay too, you are left with $100,000 in debt over here. And that can create a bit of an issue, even though I understand you injected all your proceeds in here, but you decided to put more cash in here, which is good, but the debt ends up being lower than the debt on your relinquished property. And that's like a, what's the difference over here? Let's see. That's like a $400,000 debt reduction. that you can call a debt reduction, or, I mean, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it is also called debt boot. And here's the thing. Even though you did not actually get this $400,000 in your pocket as cash, but since you downgraded on the debt, that is called debt boot. And the IRS will see this as ordinary, I mean, not ordinary, but as investment income at the end of the year, as taxable income. And they will tax you on this as well. And I understand it did not come into your pockets, but in the eyes of the IRS, it somehow did. So therefore, they will tax you on this $400,000 debt difference. And, well, you'll owe taxes on that, and it will be these capital gain taxes. So if you held this property for a year or more and then did a 1031, this is where your tax rate will come from on this $400,000 debt. But if you held it for less, then these complicated ordinary income tax rates would end up being applicable to this $400,000 debt reduction that you have here. So what could you do to avoid this situation? Simple as that. Let me just go ahead and erase this just to make it a little less complicated. What could you do? Okay, right here, that's good enough. So what you could do over here is that, look, the price is about $2 million, no problem. And just make sure that, look, when you inject all of these $500,000 proceeds in here, that's pretty good. Then you're left with a loan of about $1.5 million. That's the debt over here. No issues. Then you're good to go. Because what just happened over here is you injected all your proceeds in here. You also got a property higher in value, about $1 million more in value, and your debt over here ended up being about $1.5 million. I'm sorry, my math is pretty bad, about $1 million higher, and you just satisfied the debt requirement, and you just satisfied the equal or greater in value requirement, and you injected all your proceeds in there. That's a successful 1031. But what if you just did not want any debt on it? You were trying to keep this property as debt-free as possible. What could you do then? Well, then at that point, I mean, if this debt was $100,000, as I showed you before, that would be an issue. But what you could do is just pour in about $1.5 million worth of cash in here out of your own pocket. Just pour that in, and then this property would be debt-free, and then you would not have to worry about this debt boot, because your cash that you would pour in this case the $1.5 million, would go ahead and offset the debt. And there would be no debt reduction, so therefore the IRS would have nothing to consider as taxable income that allegedly came into your pocket. So therefore, if you just put like about a $1.5 million in cash over here, then in this case, if you just brought, here are your proceeds right over here, but then you brought 1.5 million in cash and you bought the property like that, then you're good to go. But of course, if some debt was left over and it was less than this, then that's a problem. But of course, the other way to avoid it is to make sure you get a debt that's higher. You get a mortgage on this property that's higher than this mortgage on your relinquished. Even if it was just higher by like $1,000, that would be good enough right there. But if it was below, then it would be an issue. So anyways, folks, I really hope that the knowledge I just offered here was valuable. That's kind of it for me today. If I know this was a little confusing, but then again, if you folks have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be able to answer them. But if a situation like this applies to you on your 1031, you got to consult with your CPA there, because they will be able to give you some better facts. But this is just a little concept that I decided to lay on you folks so that you can understand it a little better and get an idea of what you need to consider when you do a 1031. So anyways, folks, that's it for me today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Until then, I will see y'all in the next video.